It's really cold. It is 32 degrees and I left the car and I don't have gloves. I don't have a hat. At least I brought my puffy, so that's good. But man, it's really chilly out and I am not prepared. I am dressed for fall and it is winter in the Catskills. The foliage is fantastic. And so it actually is like a really good time to visit. A lot better than I thought it was gonna be. So I was just down there shooting the Kaaterskill Falls and I'm just switching hands so I can warm up my other one. So I was just down there shooting the falls and it's a really extraordinary view. There's this viewpoint that's just a mile, maybe less round trip from the parking lot. And it has a lovely view of the Catskills, the Kaaterskill Falls. So I set up there. There were a couple other photographers, so I didn't want to shoot video and capture kind of my photography process there just because, I don't know, I don't like being that guy. I spent a lot of time down there trying to figure out the right framing, and I think it worked out pretty well. There was really nice like brown foliage, maybe oak trees in one corner in one quadrant, and then you had the falls kind of coming down, nicely positioned there, and some great foliage framing the shot. The one thing that was bothering me is I just could not find a good position for the tripod and for my camera body so I could get the falls, the foliage, and then still see the very top of the falls coming down. There was a tree there that had green leaves that just was blocking that view. So I spent a lot of time moving the camera around. And what's kind of amazing when you're shooting, I don't know, pretty wide. So that was a 24 millimeter lens focal length. It's kind of amazing how much a tiny, tiny little adjustment makes on the framing of the shot. I'm terrible about recording this stuff in the field, so I'm back here in the studio. This is the first shot I took, and there are two things that are changing in this series. This shot was taken 15 minutes before sunrise, and it's the first framing, which has the pool of water at the bottom, the foliage on the left, and is a little bit empty on the right side. I then moved on to a different framing where I could have more foliage surrounding the waterfall, but at the cost of not seeing the pool of water at the bottom of the falls. This was taken after sunrise, so you see the warm tones and a little bit more even light. And in my final attempt to take a shot of this scene, I moved even further down the platform once other photographers had left, and I got this perspective, which is a little bit more robust in terms of having foliage on the right side and a little more balanced, but the downside is that you lose the pool entirely as well as the base of the waterfall. I think of the group, my favorite is still that first one I took, which is the base of the waterfall. You have the pool, it's pre-sunrise, so there's a kind of interesting blue glow to the scene, and it just pops in a very nice way. Now I'm going to head down to the bottom of the falls and see if I can get some good shots of the waterfall. There's sort of two steps to the fall, so I'm going to try to get down to the bottom and shoot up. So we'll see how that goes. But great morning so far. Lovely to get outside. All right, so I'm on the trail heading down to the lower falls, but I thought I'd talk a little bit about exposure time in waterfalls. Now, there are a lot of videos on this, and I'm by no means a waterfall expert, but one of the things I've come to appreciate is there's no perfect setting for a waterfall shot. And I've seen people talk about, 1/6 of a second, 1 second exposure, things like that, but I don't really get that because you have to account for the flow of the water in your timing. So that means if the water's flowing very, very slowly down, you could do a longer exposure, and the waterfall is going to look exactly the same as if the water's falling very fast and you do a shorter exposure relatively. And so that's all to say, it's very important to take into account the flow of the water in determining how fast your exposure should be so that you can get the desired blurring of the water as it's flowing down. Hey everyone, it's Matt back in the studio again. So I've taken 3 photos. They're exactly the same exposure. The only thing I'm shifting is the time of the exposure, and then when I edited them in Lightroom, I copy and pasted the edits so that they're exactly the same edits on all 3 photos. And I gotta be honest with you, I'm not seeing much of a difference in this little experiment. So even though I've doubled the exposure time from 0.4, more than doubled, to 1 second, there's slight differences in the photos, but really they're quite similar. And so this is actually maybe evidence that you have to go even more extreme difference in the exposure, maybe even further fractions of a second to maybe something like 2 seconds to really see evidence of that difference. But I like all 3 exposures. I think they're nice photos and they turned out really nicely. So maybe the takeaway here is that there's actually a little bit of wiggle room in terms of your exposure time where you can still get a similar shot despite changes in the time of the exposure. So one thing I'm doing here is for the first time I'm trying an ND polarizing filter, and what that means is it's a neutral density filter which basically makes everything darker and lets you get longer exposures, but it's also a polarizing filter which eliminates reflection and glare. And so you can see here, this is without the polarizer on. There's a lot of reflection and glare on those rocks, but as I turn the polarizer, that reflection and the glare of the sunlight starts to dissipate, and it's much, much more evident in the photos that I got from this photo shoot. As we did before, I'm going to compare the 2 images. This is the first image, which has no polarizing in effect. It does have the ND filter on so that we can get a longer exposure, and I've edited the photo and applied exactly the same settings to the next photo I'm going to show you. As you can see here, there's a fair amount of glare on the water, particularly in the very bottom of the frame and also on those rocks in the center of the frame. And if we compare this photo to one that's exactly the same except it has polarizing in effect, you can see that glare is almost eliminated. There's no glare on that bottom part there, that completely went away, as well as on the rocks, and it's a much more evenly composed image. So once again, I'll show you the before and the after on the same screen so you can see the difference yourself. I'm really happy with this. I've never had an ND polarizing filter before. It's a 3-stop ND filter, and it's a great piece of kit, particularly for waterfall photography just like this. Well, I didn't record an outro in the field, so bear with me here from the studio. I hope you enjoyed today. I really enjoyed putting this together, particularly all the comparisons. It helps me see kind of why I'm doing the things I'm doing in the field and take a little bit of stock of that. If you did like the video, please subscribe to the channel, and please like the video in YouTube as well as in your personal life. It helps a lot to grow the channel and make sure that my content's out there and that people actually see it based on the algorithm. So thanks a lot for watching if you made it this far, and I hope you enjoyed. I'm gonna leave you with a photo I took of 2 influencers in the wild, maybe. They were jumping into the falls, and not literally into the falls, but taking photos of themselves in front of it. And I really wanted to get in there and take a selfie, but I wasn't able to do it because my batteries died in the field and I wasn't properly charged. But I will leave that for another day and tips of things not to do when in the field. But hope you're doing well, and take care, and please get outside for this tail end of autumn in New England. It is about to be winter, and we got to enjoy every last moment that we can. Bye-bye.